And what's going on, Los Angeles, Bruin Nation? How is everybody doing? The MadMan here on the latest episode of the Bruin Bites. So excited to be here and so much to unpack. My goodness, how much has happened with UCLA football since our last recording? 10, you named it, 10 commits out of a class of 11 so far in the transfer portal that have committed in the last 72 to 96 hours that has propelled UCLA to the number 7 transfer portal class in the entire country. And can't wait to break it all down. Feels like Deshaun and company are absolutely cooking with fire. There's grease on the stove and a lot of magic that's about to happen. And so let's dive right into it, folks. Look, this was going to be the perception of a rebuilding year going into 2025 when you saw how much this team was going to lose, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. When you look at the fact that 11 of the top 12 tacklers on this team were out of eligibility, including Carson Schweschinger, that we believe is going to go to the NFL, a lot of work to do for Deshaun and company, and they have just come out storming out of the gates. After the first couple of days of the portal period, I think they assessed, they strategized, they looked at who they wanted, they filtered, they down-selected, and now it has been attack, attack, attack. It has been a flurry of commits over the last 72 to 96 hours, and we're so thrilled about it with the Bruins of UCLA. We got to start in the secondary, and this was going to be a position group that was going to be the most bare going into 2025. When you look at sort of things holistically from a big picture perspective, no more KJ Wallace, no more Devin Kirkwood. Jalen Davies just announced that he was going to go into the portal. No more Kalen Moore. No more Ramon Henderson. You know, when you start, no more Brian Addison. So when you sort of assessed it in terms of your key performers, the perception was you don't want to rely so heavily on incoming freshmen and players with no experience. You're going to have to go double down in the portal and go sort of attack that position group. And that's exactly what the Bruins did. Counted five defensive backs have committed to UCLA, and we're going to sort of go down the list and break it down for you. There's so many players that have committed to UCLA over the last 72 to 96 hours that for the first time ever, I actually have notes over here to sort of keep track of everyone, their stats, etc. It's going to be probably the first and only time I ever use notes on a Bruin Bites ever. So, bear with me here as we sort of go through it, but really wanting to provide our viewers a really holistic assessment of what's going on. We'll start with Andre Jordan Jr., 6'1", 183 pounds. He's coming over from Oregon State. And over the course of the last season, 27 tackles, 2 TFLs, 4 pass breakups. This is clearly an individual that is a little bit lanky at 183, but likes to play that press coverage, which I think is a staple in many ways of the Malloy defense, particularly in downs and distances of need. And so Andre Jordan Jr. is really a nice add. And together with the cornerback from Louisville, Aaron Williams, who's 6'2", 185, again, similar build. And what's significant about Aaron Williams is a kid out of St. John's Bosco. And so you're starting to establish now that Bosco pipeline to UCLA, and it's going to be sort of very exciting to see. Aaron Williams was a little used with Louisville this year, but all the rawness and the talent is there. And between Williams at 6'2", 185, Andre Jordan Jr. at 6'1", 183, you can see that there's an archetype. There's kind of the 6'1", 6'2 corner, 180 to 185 pounds that wants to be physical, that wants to sort of attack the ball, that wants to sort of attach themselves to the hips of opposing wide receivers. And so you're starting to sort of see an identity form in what Ikaika Malloy wants to do on the perimeter, building off of this season. But I think where I'm even more excited is at the safety spot. And there's been 3 safeties that have joined this class in a very significant way. The first is Aaron Williams' teammate, Benjamin Perry, a safety out of Louisville, 6'3", 205. He had 29 tackles last year, 1 sack, 1 forced fumble. And together with Benjamin Perry, Key Lawrence, a safety out of Ole Miss of the famed SEC, 6 feet even, 205 pounds. While he struggled last year to sort of get on the field with injuries, between 2021 and 2023, Key Lawrence had 148 total tackles in the SEC. I mean, that's absolutely significant. And then finally, Brian Threats, a safety out of Central Florida, 5'10", 195, a little bit smaller than the likes of Lawrence and Perry, but 115 total tackles and 4 interceptions between 22 and 23. And again, this past year just kind of struggled to find time on the field due to injury and just due to roster construction. So when you think about Andre Jordan Jr. and Aaron Williams at corner, and then the likes of Perry, Lawrence, and Threats at safety, what you're really kind of creating here is depth and a replenishing and a rebuilding of the pipeline of the secondary. And I think what Malloy is really searching for is who is going to be the captain of this secondary moving forward? Who's going to step into that Stephen Blaylock role from a couple of years ago that's going to be calling out the defensive plays and formations? Who's going to be that Kamari Ramsey from 2023? Unfortunately, Ramsey left for across town. I think that left a bit of a void, particularly at the start of the season with the secondary, because you need that stalwart on the back end, that captain, to be able to sort of assess when the opposing quarterback calls for motion to determine what the opposing defense is going to be, and then you want to check off of that check. And Blaylock and Ramsey were so good at that, and I'm expecting to see either Lawrence or Perry really emerge into that role. So excited about the secondary indeed, and so much more to come with UCLA for sure. We got to segue then to offensive line. And we talk so much about the trench play and the breakdown of that particular position group on both sides of the ball with UCLA going into 2025. And we started the momentum here with Julian Armella, the 6'5", 290-pound transfer from Florida State, spent 2 years at Florida State, has 2 years of eligibility left. Some recruiting agencies had him as a 4-star. Some had him even as a 5-star in the very decorated South Florida area. So we started to kind of get things rolling there. Remember, this was also a position group, a lot of turnover. We were going to lose Holstege. We were going to lose Carlin. Nicky Prongos went into the transfer portal. So now going into next season, we were looking at Sam Yoon, who was definitely going to be a long-term solution at center. I think Yoon needs to put on a little bit of weight, but in terms of his quickness, in terms of his intelligence, in terms of his poise, in terms of his footwork, in terms of the way his usage of hands post-snap, we definitely have our center over the next 2 or 3 years. And then Garrett DiGiorgio is a very serviceable offensive lineman coming into his final year in college on the right side of that line. But now with Armella, we start getting some beef. And then the two big gets from the last couple of days. The first is Cortland Ford from Kentucky. He's going to come in as a senior with 1 year of eligibility left. 6'6", 327 pounds. Again, after having spent several years in the big, bad, mighty SEC. And then the latest get, the one I think everyone's really excited about because he's just going to be a freshman. He's just had 1 year of college, so many years of eligibility left here. Eugene Brooks, the 6'4", 325-pound offensive lineman from OU, Oklahoma. Again, a fellow SEC compatriot. And what's even more significant with Eugene Brooks is not just his size, not just the raw skills, not just the pedigree of coming from OU, but he's another local kid from Sierra Canyon. So you're now starting to build that pipeline. And so what's so exciting here now is we went into a situation saying, my God, what's going to happen with this offensive line? Now you have Yoon, you have Armella, you have Brooks, you have Ford, and you have DiGiorgio. That's probably going to be your starting 5. And now the onus is on the coaching staff to figure out exactly which position groups and where everybody matches up, knowing that Yoon is going to be the center. And now you can rely on your younger guys and the guys that have come into the program right away this past year and the year before to provide that depth. So we're starting to see this position group really gel and become extremely credible when you look at the overall offensive system. So now when you sort of look at the Bruins on the offensive line, this is now a legitimate 5. And I think if they can sort of bolster the depth, now you've got, again, we talked about a lot of great stuff going on at the wide receiver position. You got Gilmer. You're going to have TMA. You're excited about all of that. Jaden Wilson is coming from Arkansas. So there's a lot to like there in terms of the wide receiver position. And then you got Berger and you got Carson Cox at running back. And then Hudson Habermill is coming off of injury and taking over for Matavao at tight end. So all the pieces now are there offensively for Tino Sunseri to say, okay, do I need to go get a veteran quarterback? Perhaps, and most likely I do. Or do I let Demarcus Davis, Luke Duncan battle it out and trust that what's around them is credible, and my scheme and strategy is effective enough to make them successful in year one? So now a lot to be excited about this offense. Now, the last position group that this sort of class has really attacked moving forward has been defensive line, and it's what we needed. And if we thought the offensive line was bare in terms of looking at 2025, the defensive line even more so. I mean, when you talked about losing our fearsome foursome, we talked about Carson, Jay Toia, Oladipo, Madrano, but then even beyond that, from a defensive line perspective, Sharif Say, Kafusi, Sataki, I mean, everybody was sort of headed for the exits there from an eligibility perspective. So you're really sort of starting from the ground floor on the defensive line. And the Bruins have, again, done a phenomenal job sort of attacking that position group. Kaeo Akana, a defensive end from Utah, 6'3", 233 pounds, sophomore, didn't really play much in the Utah scheme that first year, given injury, sort of, again, given scheme. But the fact that he was good enough for Kyle Whittingham and that physical Utah program to come out right out of high school is really a very ringing endorsement. Let's not forget, before the Pac-12 broke up and we sort of had all of this reorganization in college football, Utah was the back-to-back Pac-12 champion right before Washington had their final run at it. And so Utah was really, in many ways, if not the best program in the Pac-12, certainly one of the 2 or 3 best programs in the Pac-12 over that conference's final 8 to 10 years. And it certainly wasn't due to the fact that they were getting a litany of 4- and 5-star prospects. It was really building that team from the inside out on the offensive and defensive line. So the fact that Akana was someone that was recognized by Kyle Whittingham to sort of follow that lineage, absolutely significant. And even if the stats don't bear out from last year in terms of just sort of evidence, because he's raw, that potential and that upside is something that we have to be really excited about. And then beyond that, the even bigger get that just sort of broke down a couple of hours ago, Nico DeVillier, the starting interior defensive lineman for Arkansas, 6'4", 271 pounds, 25 tackles and a sack. The fact that he was starting for Arkansas on that interior defensive line, again, from that SEC, really shows that this defensive line is really making a step forward. So now you've got a situation, you've got Akana, you've got DeVillier. Look, Keanu Williams got hurt very early in the 2024 season. You got to assume Keanu's going to come back. We don't know where Gary Smith is, but you got to assume he's going to make a go at it. And now you've got kind of a Jacob Busic at the edge as more of a rotational piece along with some of your younger guys. So now you're sort of building again sort of a 4 with Akana, DeVillier, Williams, Smith III, and then Busic and others now become that rotational piece. So that position group now starting to form moving forward. Still a lot of work to do. But I think the fact that the Bruins have come out with such gangbusters over the past week really gives us a lot of hope and excitement moving forward. I think now you probably need one more offensive lineman that's a veteran to sort of round out sort of that second rotation. And the same with the defensive line. I think you need one more defensive lineman, particularly on the interior, to sort of round out that rotation. You're good at secondary now. And now the question becomes, got to really attack that linebacker room because you're replacing a ton. It's not just Madrano. It's not just Schlesinger. It's not just the fact that Oladipo went from linebacker to lineman and edge, but you're also replacing Ali Cahill. You're also replacing John Vaughns. So now you got to spend the next 2 to 3 to 4 players really bringing in some credible veteran leadership in that linebacker spot. And then do you go after a veteran quarterback? So you're starting to sort of put these pieces together. I think it's going to be one offensive lineman, one defensive lineman, 2 to 3 linebackers, and perhaps a quarterback is what's left on Deshaun Foster's checklist. So hopefully we can sort of close with 6 or 7 more players. And now this class of about 17, 18, 19 players in the transfer portal becomes really a linchpin significantly for the Bruins in 2025. So really exciting what we're seeing here. And I think we have to sort of take a step back and really commend Deshaun Foster on a number of different levels, because whatever he's pitching is working. And we are now in a world in college football that has become so transactional, that has become so much about the money, that has become so much about the individual player and not about the team anymore, just given NIL, transfer portal, and the opportunity to get these bags, that we're really in a world where college football most closely resembles Major League Baseball. It's an uncapped sport. It's an uncapped professional sport, frankly, because guys are getting paid. And so when you look at Major League Baseball, you're always going to have the Dodgers and the Yankees and the Mets and the Red Sox and the Phillies, but how do other teams compete? And I think Deshaun Foster has sort of tapped into his inner Billy Beane, because he's found a value proposition for UCLA that has become quite effective with these players. And when you think about it, UCLA is not going to have the NIL war chest in football of an Oregon, of an Ohio State, of a Texas, of a Georgia. So their value proposition is going to be, you can make some nil, not as much as you're going to make at perhaps some other schools, but you're going to come to the number one public university in the world, in the most beautiful campus in the world, and you're going to have a program and an alumni that care very deeply about you, and you're going to have a head coach that not only played in a Rose Bowl, but also played in a Super Bowl. And how many coaches can actually say that? So many coaches can talk about, hey, I put this guy in the league, or over the last 5 years, this is sort of my track record of putting guys in the next level, which is all very credible. But how many guys can actually say, I was on the field for the Rose Bowl, I was on the field for the Super Bowl against Tom Brady, and I scored a touchdown. I know what that grass smelled like. I know what those locker rooms feel like. I know the business side of the game. I know what scouts look for. I know what GMs look for. So the fact that Deshaun Foster, I think, has found a niche here and a really nice value proposition moving forward. And I think it also speaks to how he's sort of handling his staff. I loved what he did over the last 24 hours. He's promoted Jerry Neuheisel to assistant head coach. He's brought in Scott White, promoted him from defensive analyst to linebackers coach and associate head coach. He's really bringing guys along that have come with him on this journey. And what I love is that I've always said that for UCLA football to kind of reach its ceiling once again and sort of get back to sort of where it was in the 80s and 90s, you need that next iteration of Donahue. You need the guy that thinks of this job as a calling, that this is the destination job, this is a dream job, you're an alum, you care so deeply about this place, and it's a calling. And I think in the case of Deshaun, and I think it shows that he sort of sees that also in Jerry Neuheisel, because he's made him assistant head coach. He hasn't done it with Sunseri. He's done it with Jerry Neuheisel, that he sort of sees that similarity of calling. And I think that's what's going to be so significant, because you can sort of go with a different approach and say, I just want the biggest hot shot around. But the reality is going to be that individual is going to be a coach for 2 or 3 years and then go to their next job. It's going to treat UCLA football as a stepping stone. And so you're always going to be in this sort of, pattern of flux where over 2 or 3 years you could be really good. Then you're going to have some down years if you miss on the coach. And then, you sort of have to hit it again. But when you hit it again, it's going to be very short-lived, versus a situation like this where you have a guy that really understands what it means to be a Bruin, that understands true Bruin values and wants to be here for the long haul, 20, 25 years, because that's how successful organizations are built. And you might suffer a little bit of pain up front with some rebuilding in those first 2 or 3 years, but then the dividends pays off later. And so we have to commend Martin Jarman for thinking of the hire in this particular way. And we have to start commending Deshaun for how he's sort of executing this offseason. They both got off to sort of rough starts, particularly Deshaun with Big Ten Media Day. But the fact is, you got to try this model. You have to try this model. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But commend UCLA for thinking differently in a sport that has become fundamentally inequitable. So much to be excited about here. You look at the landscape of college football right now, so many programs are losing players left, right, and center. No one can really point to what is their culture. And as a result, all of these schools are sort of blending together, and all you're looking for is the biggest bag, the most opportunity for playing time, and the most frictionless path to the league. But, those schools that can still provide those things, in moderation, but also the kind of that holistic experience, I think are going to win the day. And those culture creators are going to win the day. So kudos to Deshaun, kudos to Martin Jarman, and what a great start that we have to sort of portal season. More work to be done, like we talked about, of getting 6 or 7 more players at those particular position groups. But my God, what a great start for UCLA. We have so much to be excited about, and we will have you all covered as soon as everything breaks. Our next episode is probably going to be a fun surprise guest, and I'm just going to sort of leave it at that and keep the suspense rolling. But as always, it is just as we talk about Deshaun having UCLA head coach as his calling, this show and this network is my calling, because I love UCLA so much from the bottom of my heart. And so as always, Bruin Nation, much love to you. Can't wait to talk in a few days. MadMan over and out here, and 4's up forever.